Hello and welcome, Bumblebee ID people. So here we are in June. We've got lots of bumblebees showing up kind of all over the place now. So hopefully you're getting a chance to practice your ID with some real bees out there. And we're just getting together to get a chance to talk about what we're seeing, ask questions. We do have just a brief little refresher presentation for Rufus Cinctus. So partly because that's one of the tricky ones. They also, at least around the Twin Cities here, seem to be having a pretty good year. So we're already seeing lots of them. So it's a good one to maybe be reminded of what they're doing. So so I'm just gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen here to just provide this refresher for Rufus Cinctus. So Rufus Cinctus, red-belted bumblebees, they're a little bit smaller than some of the other typical bumblebees out there, or real super common bumblebees. Their hairs are fairly short. They have a short face, short malar space. The color pattern can be pretty variable. So we're going to go over what that involves. So their common name is the red-belted bumblebee, but sometimes they have a red belt, sometimes they don't. And lots of different color patterns show up for them. And this can even be with bees that are in the same nest, can have these really different color patterns. So some bumblebee species will have a lot of variability in color pattern that'll be more kind of geographic, but these are just kind of everywhere. They can have really highly variable patterns, but there are some rules for the color pattern that are good to remember. So there are a few things that you can say are always. So there's always yellow on T1 and a crescent down onto T2. So building on that, you can either add orange or red or not to varying degrees on T2 down to T5. There can also be this racing stripe where T4 can have a yellow band. And one thing to note is that it's the only species we have here in the Midwest that has this intermixing of red and black hairs, where you'll see those right kind of next to each other instead of separating it out into distinct places. There's a couple other things that can help just when you're out there trying to narrow things down. So there's this characteristic that's not diagnostic, but it is something that can be eye-catching, where they have this between the wing bases, they have a fair number of black hairs there, but it's also kind of shiny. So they have this eye-shaped area on the thorax that tends to be more shiny, and that Zach has deemed the Eye of Sauron.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. And at least in the Twin Cities and surrounding, like this is a really good character. Like if you see an eye-shaped band, you should think Rufus Inctus. The further north you get, it kind of breaks down because like Vagans and Sandersoni especially can have a similar band. So in northern Minnesota, this is like, yeah, especially like Vagans and Sandersoni and Rufus Cinctus are all very, very, very tricky. But around here, it's a really good character.
So here's a picture showing that kind of intermixing these black and red hairs or orange hairs kind of right next to each other on the abdomen. Here's an example of that T1 is yellow, and then this crescent of T2, but it's actually T2 is mostly yellow, but you'll still, if you can see on the sides here, we're still able to see some black hairs kind of at the edge of T2. And so just that amount, you know, when they do have the red or the orange, it can be a lot, it can be a little. Even that is really variable. Here's one that has lots and lots of orange, and here you can really see that how that yellow on T2 is really a crescent shape there. This one has that additional kind of stripe down on T4. Another one that's a little hard to see what's going on here under the wings, but you can see this that eye shaped on the thorax. You can see that racing stripe down there. Get some idea of what's going on the sides there. So this one kind of has a variety pack with all these different things. It's got the base of the T1 is all yellow, that crescent of yellow on T2, then a good deal of red and orange, and then they also have the racing stripe down on T4.
That last one looks like it's hard to confuse with the tricolored, because that one's yellow, red, red, yellow.
Yeah, so one thing is just kind of how stuff is intermixed. So these even with the, you know, with the colors, with this, it is a lot of orange here, but there are kind of black hairs intermixed. Also just seeing this crescent here, whereas yeah, the tricolor will just be, you know, solid bands across the tergite. But yeah, at first glance, it could be confusing, especially with the yellow down at the bottom there too.
Yeah, and especially with the tricolored one, those would have T2 completely orange. But like it can be very easy for the wings of the Rufosinctus to cover up that bit of yellow in the middle of T2, so you got to make sure to check for that. And there's also a different shape. The black band between the thorax is bigger in the tricolored or ternarius, and it also tends to extend onto the scutellum in the rear, whereas this, it's more the typical eye shape.
So males are generally following the same rules, but they can be trickier. They're just kind of a bit more variable, and yeah, I don't know. Scragglier looking and a little harder to just narrow down. The eyes for the males on Rufo are they are kind of a bigger, but just a bit bigger. They're not as big as the Griseocolus eyes are. So that can be one thing to look at for the males. But in general, for telling apart difficult pairs, we can generally fit the males are generally following the same pattern, so we can talk about them and the same kind of thing if we're looking at Rufosinctus versus Griseocolus. They both will have a kind of a crescent on T2, but Griseocolus we'll see that those kind of brown hairs at the anterior edge of that or posterior edge of that crescent. They tend to be larger, tend to be shorter hair. Rufosinctus are generally smaller and more scraggly. And again, Griseocolus will have a lot more yellow hairs near those wing bases, whereas Rufosinctus will have more black there. For Rufosinctus versus Aphanus, they are both going to have a dark band on the thorax. So for Rufus cinctus, there will be more hairs, especially right close to the wing bases. You'll see more dark hairs there, whereas Aphanus will tend to have some lighter hairs there. So that that stripe between the wing bases is less extensive for Aphanus. And the patterns on T1 and 2 will be different. Aphanus, we won't be seeing that crescent like you will with the Rufus cinctus. So another thing to look at for Rufus cinctus versus Aphanus is the size and the hair length. So again, Rufus cinctus tends to be very small and shaggy. Aphanus will tend to have shorter hair. And looking at T2, there will be red or black hairs at the edge, the apical edge. Whereas with Aphanus, they'll have yellow in that same corner. Queens are still out now a little bit. And the Aphanus queens will definitely be noticeably larger, have that more kind of shorter velvety hair. The Rufus cinctus queens are pretty small. You can also look for yellow hairs on the top of the head, whereas the Aphanus queens will have mostly just black hairs on top of the head. And again, more kind of yellow on the thorax for Aphanus. And really, the biggest thing that should pop out right away is kind of the size, because Aphanus queens are pretty chunky, robust. I am going to stop sharing so you can share, Zach, and talk about your photos. Oh, you're muted. I said while I was muted.
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm reloading the thing on my screen. Okay. Now I need to share the screen. All right. Do you see it all right? Okay. So this is just I pulled a bunch of pictures off of my memory card because I've seen a lot of Rufos this year. And they're really great bees, and it's really fun to like document all the color patterns. But yeah, so this is kind of the classic Rufo queen where she has lots of orange, plus the yellow on the base. And there are kind of consistent differences between queens and workers. Like Queen Rufo cinctus are small for queens. Like they're generally about a little bit smaller than Bimaculatus queens. And so they're like distinctly smaller than like Impatiens queens, Arcomis queens, Aphanus queens, for example. So the queens are relatively small. If you didn't know bumblebees very well, you might even mistake them for a worker. They're that small. And then Rufo workers, especially this time of year, are quite tiny. I've seen a handful of Rufo workers, but still I'm seeing a fair number of queens. Oh yeah, so this was a really tricky one that I saw this spring that at first glance I thought was Bimaculatus, because her T2 crescent is really tiny, and even her kind of the eye-shaped band is pretty reduced. And that having that eye-shaped band between the wing bases is often reduced in queens. And that's something to watch out for. But often when they are reduced like that, they often like also have a lot of yellow on the face. So that's something to watch out for. And then this one, I was a little bit lucky. she had a little bit of yellow on the racing stripe on T4 and T5. And so that was kind of what made me take a second look at this. And also, yeah, I saw in the chat, Julia put in a similar one where it was a rufosinctus that looked like a bimaculatus. So those crop up, and you just kind of got to be on the lookout. And to answer the other question, within rufo nests, you see variable color patterns. That's been documented. So even the siblings will look different. Right, and here's another kind of similar one where she has no red or orange, but she has kind of that base and then that racing stripe. And just a very nice bee. They like the Virginia waterleaf a lot. That's where I saw a lot of them. And then they also will be on the Baptisia now, but that's kind of ending. And yeah, and then here's kind of a more typical one where she has some orange added onto the abdomen. In this one, the black band between the wing bases is really reduced, but you can also see she has a lot of yellow on her head and face as well. Yeah, and then just another kind of tricky one where she just has the base model and the rest is black and that kind of eye-shaped band. And this was my first worker that I saw, and Rufo workers are very funny because they look straggly. They tend to have a really pronounced eye-shaped band. They tend to be really shy, so it can be hard to get a look at them. And they tend to like kind of weird plants, like visiting like this cultivated geranium that most of the other bumblebees were avoiding. And then here's just another really pretty one that I saw last fall, where she has the nice orange color. And another fall one that was a little tricky, but she has a really pronounced eye-shaped band. And then exciting news, I saw an Aphanus queen last week. It was my first one of the year. She was robbing penstemon in my neighbor's garden. So that was exciting. And notice here, like, she has a nice big bee, has a tiny little bit of black on the thorax, has a totally dark head, and then you can also see kind of like under the wing bases is that patch of black hairs, which can help let you know you have an Aphanus queen. Because like vagans, for example, won't have black hairs there. And she was fairly big, but she was on the small side for an Aphanus queen. So that's that.
Okay, yeah, I just had, I have a couple slides here. You can just keep sharing and I can just talk through these. So, so yeah, we're kind of open for answering questions now. I also wanted to make sure, hopefully people can just add files in the chat if you have a file you want to share with us. And I thought I'd just point out that's what the symbol looks like. You should be able to click on that and add a file if you have a photo file that you want to share with us. Or if you go to the next one, I think I have screen sharing enabled for other people. I never quite know with Zoom if that's really going to work, but if you are up for just sharing your screen, we can do that too. Otherwise, we can just answer questions, share links if you have slidings up that you want to talk about. It's your time now.
I'll go ahead. Let me think here. Let me pull up my pictures here. I don't think anything is particularly difficult. They're just interesting pictures I've got. This one, I think. So this is Rufus Cinctus from last year, for actually 2021, June 15th, 2021. This is, I thought, just really interesting. This obviously is not a bumblebee, but I had heard that if you're having yellow jackets bothering you at a picnic, give them what they want and they'll leave you alone. So I put this piece of chorizo upwind of me. She went right to it, carved off a piece and went away. She came back 10 minutes later, but we were done eating. This is I think an Ephesus queen. No, not
Yeah, Impatience Queen.
Impatience. Get my words, looking for a nest, I think. I was weeding dandelions and she was checking out every hole I made. This picture of it is Impatience. No, wait. What is that?
That is Rufo.
That's a roof, is it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Can
Rufo
see
Queen.
the,
Okay. Yeah, the Eye of Sauron there.
Yep.
And you can
hard-
see some black on the, if you go back for a second, you can see some black on the edges of, you can see that crescent, there's black on the edges of T2.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a tricky one.
Yes, they get very tricky.
These are the same guy. So looking at this is, I believe, what was the date on this one? May 10th. Okay, that one, that's just having fun with the Penstemon. I like that picture.
Yeah, that's an Impatience Queen.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Impatience Queen. There's a better picture that's easier to tell. And that's all I've got. I just really, that made me happy that I planted Penstemon.
Yeah, the bees really like it. Especially the really big one that just flowered. I saw a lot of queens visiting that.
I have
Grandiflorus.
I have showy beard tongue out right now. That the big bright purple one. Okay, that's all I've got.
All right, yeah, we've got some, Patricia, do you wanna tell us anything about your citrinus?
Yeah, I just thought it was very interesting. It confused me at first because what is this bee that has so much yellow on its thorax and it's all black on its abdomen? And then I noticed some things about it. First of all, it didn't have the pollen basket structure on the hind leg, and also it was curvy. Its abdomen curved in more, and so I thought I had a definitely had a cuckoo bee. And then I thought, well, okay, so then your notes were excellent from the course. And I went and I noticed that the sides of the thorax, if you look at the photos that I posted to the chat, sides of the thorax are yellow and the other cuckoos are more black. And of course, if you have a cuckoo bee, it's 99% sure it's going to be citrinus. That was the clincher. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I
Looking
agree.
at those photos. Okay.
Yeah, and on that second one, that's a nice shot that shows kind of the top of the head, side of the head. You can see that broad cuckoo bee head that they have.
Yeah, I know that's the other feature, was it looked really kind of boxy. The head, I mean, generally.
Yeah, and this is one of the darker ones. Typically they have T3 yellow, but they're variable, like all cuckoo bees. And yeah, the thing to watch out for these days is Bombus insularis does seem like it's becoming more common in our area, which is kind of exciting, but also they're tricky. But those would have much more black between the wing bases, especially, whereas citrinus are almost all yellow.
Cool. Thank you.
Julia, do you want to tell us what's going on with your observation? Is this the one I looked at on Saturday?
Disclaimer, I showed this to Elaine already, but I thought it'd be fun to talk about it with everybody.
And I wasn't 100%, so.
Let's see if I can just share my screen. Maybe that's easier. All right. So this is in my backyard. It's screenshots of a video. So if the experts here want to see the video, you're welcome to. it's kind of like, is it Oricomis? Is it Pennsylvanicus? I'm leaning towards Oricomis, but I just don't really know. But then it has this like T1 with this little like thing that comes up in the middle, but it's not a straight line across the T1. It doesn't really have like I can't really see the sort of yellow hair eyebrows. There's the like little like triangle here on T1. There's another shot of the head. So it's not good enough quality to see the ocelli or anything else, but I don't really see any yellow, but obviously that, you know, could be just a weird one. This is a shot of more of the thorax.
All right, so you had to bet money. What do you think it is?
If I had to bet money, I would say, well, Pennsylvanicus is super rare, and so it's probably not that. But I don't know.
Oh, you should never discount rarity,
I
or
know.
weight it too heavily. You know, Pennsylvanicus is absolutely in the cities, and that's what this is. I've
Okay,
seen
that's what I thought.
I've seen
Woo!
6 of them, I think, give or
I will.
take, in St. Paul, over the years. So they're here, but they're not super common. But yeah, like you have a good shot of that T1. Yeah, and often in Pennsylvanicus, it can either be a straight line across or like this one kind of concentrated in the middle like that. So you can see how it's like is almost like a triangle in the middle, and that is a sure Pennsylvanicus sign. And the one thing to watch out for that is like sometimes there's like a weird reflection on Aricomis that can look like that in some photos, but that doesn't look like the case here. And then combined with like the total lack of yellow on the head, and also typically Aricomis would have like at least a little bit of yellow on the scutellum, but this doesn't. So yeah, this is a Pennsylvanicus queen, which is really nice to find in the cities. They're not common.
Wow, yeah, that's why I was like, can't be it. I was like outside, like trying to catch her again, like in my pajamas, running
Oh,
around trying to get another picture of her. But yeah, that's great. Cool.
but yeah, good find. That's a good bee.
Next in the lineup in the chat, we've got Maggie. You have a BU shared there.
Yes, a bunch of newbies and I'm a newbie too, so we all, the blind leading the blind, went out into the field today to take pictures of bees. And one of them just, because I told them I was going to get together with people who know more, and one of them just now sent me this from this morning. So I haven't really had a chance to look it over. It looks to me like a nice, neat bee, not shaggy. She's big. To me, but you know, I'm struggling with the whole size thing too. So, um, I don't know what to call her. I'm looking at my guide, and I'm stumped.
I think it's Oricomis.
Yeah, I was confused because of all the yellow behind the black spot on the thorax, but I can see on the guide that there is a little bit there, so maybe that's not so much.
Yeah, and Aricomis are fairly variable. This is essentially the lightest that an Aricomis can get.
Oops, sorry
Typically,
about that.
typically they're darker, but they can have like an entirely yellow scutellum. And you'll see this one, like she has T1 is usually pretty dark in Aricomis, and this one it's pretty light. But notice in contrast to Pennsylvanicus, it's kind of concentrated on the sides rather than in the middle.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's a newbie to me, so yay. Woohoo.
All right, who's next?
I'm next in the lineup. So this is a picture actually from my mother-in-law, of a bombus. And when it comes to identification, I really struggle with the thorax bit when it comes to with, sometimes I don't know if it's hair or if it's the skin of the bumblebee, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have pictures mid-flight or like, the bee is just being, it's hard to see, and it's hard to see the rest of it. Like I'm not definitive of what it could be, if that makes sense. I'm not an expert like you guys, but
Yeah, this
if
one is
anybody,
missing some hair on the thorax, so that does make it trickier. And even with this photo, even though it's not, completely, finely focused, you can still see just that area of black right behind the head. It just looks shinier. So when it, because the exoskeleton it doesn't have hair on it, it does tend to be pretty shiny. Sometimes it can have texture and could be kind of dull, but it'll still usually if you're able to look kind of closely, you can tell whether it's fuzzy hair or whether it's the exoskeleton. So that kind of shiny, it looks like there's kind of two circles of black there, and that one is just kind of a bald patch that would, and then you have to guess what it would be.
yeah.
But there's kind of what color hair it would be, but it's kind of all yellow around it. And if you're looking at other hairs, you can see pretty well on this bee what's going on T1 and T2. So you can kind of fill in what those hairs should be on the thorax.
So are you guys asking me what I think it is, or
Yeah, what do you think it is?
well, somebody in the chat helped me out, and they believe that it's Bombus vagans, which I do believe that it could be, but I don't. What happens when you don't like see the whole bumble though, for like the rest of the abdomen? Like from what I see, there is a bit of black, so it could be Bombus vagans, but. And giving on the location, this is, the Midwest. This is from actually like on the border of Illinois, Wisconsin. So it does meet the criteria of where the species would be. I'm gonna go with like what chat recommends, but that's what I think. I'm still learning. Yeah.
Anybody else have thoughts?
That T2 sure looks like Bimac.
Yeah, I think Bimac.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, so you can see pretty well the T1 and T2. You can see kind of that line between T1 and T2. So even though you can't see all the rest of the abdomen, we still have a good view of those first two segments. And on that second segment, if this were vegans, that yellow would go all the way to the edge of T2.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help that it's got the weird bald patch and is at like a not perfect orientation. So kind of like, yeah, building that skill of being able to like picture the bee when it's not facing you very well is a good skill that you can only develop with practice.
All right. I think mine are up next. And again, this is Madison, Wisconsin. I think this is the vegans, but I want confirmation. It has T1 and T2 yellow. It has a definite horsey face, as I got a nice picture of it. And I don't know, just seems to fit all the criteria for a vegans.
I
Scruffy.
I agree. I think you got a great picture of the face. Yeah, it shows really how long that malar space or cheek is, which is like, we can be sure it's vegans. Sandersoni is always a possibility. the
Mm.
further north you get, but they have a shorter face, and then this is pretty clearly a Vegans and not a Sandersoni.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, the other similar species you might get is Perplexus, but that would
Hmm.
have dark sides on the thorax, and it also would not have any black hairs in the middle of the thorax.
Okay, all right.
So good job.
I'm curious how you took the photos, just because they're that's a really nice, like that's a really nice face shot.
I have one of the new Samsung Galaxy S12 or something phones, Ultra, and they have a great camera.
Mhm.
And basically I got down, this was in the grass, and I got down low and, you know, as far as I could get close to it. And it was walking around, so it was kind of hard to get to close enough and at the right angles. But then I just took a gazillion shots, because then I am more sure of getting one in focus. And there was no particular setting on my phone that I used. I didn't use a flash. And so I think I just lucked out, and it was a good phone camera.
Yeah, that's nice to know they can do that.
Yeah, this is a step up in technology on this phone. So hopefully I can get some more good photos.
All right, looks like we have Joe is the next picture.
Yeah. So just a few things about this. I believe it's a bimaculatus just by seeing that, like there's the yellow on T2 that doesn't go all the way to the end. Um, and just a few comments about this. I just started monitoring last year, and this is the first time I started monitoring this early. And looking this over, because I've actually seen a few bimaculatus around where I live. I live in Lakeville, Illinois, Wisconsin, Illinois border. And what was interesting is, at least to me, is that they were so small. Like this one was so small compared to, some of the others I've seen. And I don't know, maybe it's just bimaculatus. The other thing is, actually uh, found some flowers in a strip mall, and that's where I started taking photos. But what was interesting is I found some other bimaculatus even at a church. So these are out everywhere.
Yeah, and you're correct. It is a bimac for sure.
Yeah,
And I mean, size is super variable in bumblebees, especially early in the season. You tend to get pretty small workers, just because
okay.
like that first generation where the queen is provisioning by herself, she usually doesn't have that much pollen to invest, so they tend to be small. And then once you get more workers, they're able to invest more pollen and make bigger workers.
Mm,
Is this
And a lot of times the Bimacs are the queens come out early, they get their nests going kind of earlier. So a lot of times you'll see Bimac workers at the same time that you're seeing queens of other species. So that makes the other
yeah,
look even bigger, or them look
right.
even smaller.
this
Yeah. I mean, and just the other observation is just that they just were zipping around so fast. Like I don't know, it just seems like later in the year, maybe the the bumblebees kind of slow down a little bit. They're more deliberate, and they don't mind just like pausing. But like with this one, it was just like unbelievable. I had to take probably like 40 shots just to get one that was, halfway decent.
the flattened abdomen makes me think it's a queen. Any
I'm not sure. It's
And
hard.
and just looking, I remember the size of it was just so small.
And is
So I
is
know
that creeping Charlie that with the teeny tiny flowers?
I think it was catmint.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
catmint.
So it's
Yeah,
a little bigger flowers than
yeah.
Charlie.
But yeah, in most places and around here, BIMAC is the first workers that I see
Okay,
very consistently.
yeah.
And we actually have BIMAC males now around here because they're the first males as well, because they go through their colony cycle very quickly.
Okay,
So yeah, mostly we haven't had to worry about males yet this year, but they're coming.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, I just shared in my chat some photos of what I believe is an Aphanus queen.
Yes.
It's June 4th, Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah, she's a good looking one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
we've had several.
It's funny, she has a little hint of a brownish spot on T2
Yeah,
in that
I
first photo,
noticed that. Yeah.
which shows up occasionally in queens.
Some of the others I've seen are just the pure yellow on the
Mhm.
T2. But there you go.
But yeah, definitely has the combination of that yellow T2. That's a very large segment, kind of that nice close cropped hair, uh, dark head, not really any black in the middle of the thorax. And then in some of these, you can see like under and behind the wings, it's got black hairs, which helps rule out things like vagans. But also vagans queens just tend to be noticeably smaller and shaggier than this. It's tough to get a good handle on it because you don't see that many Aphanus queens, unfortunately, but if you are able to see enough, then it can become pretty distinctive.
Oh, huh.
And Mary Lee is saying you're open to hosting a field day.
If anybody wants to come out in the steamy, warm sun and look at all our spotted knapweed and all the other things in full bloom.
Yeah, I actually did my a bunch of my master's work out at the Arden Hills site and saw tons of Aphanus there back in the 90s.
We have so much more habitat now and so many more forbs and flowers and everything and anything. So we've had some fun. I just don't have any pictures. I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, I can't make either the 19th or the 26th, but maybe another time.
All right, Julia, you have more photos?
Yeah, I think I have another Oricomis unclear. Um, this was in Northeast Minneapolis. I think it's one is more likely an Oricomis. It's like I can't tell if that little yellow is on her head or not. And then
Yeah, it's a little blurry in the key spots, but I would tentatively agree with Aricomis.
yeah, this was a friend who sent me a video of this, so it was kind of hard to get a good shot. But yeah, it's hard to there's like a little crease there, so I'm like, oh, maybe.
Yeah, it looks like there's maybe a little bit of yellow on the head.
Mhm.
Also, yeah, the more yellow on the scutellum also suggests Aricomis as well.
Yeah, it's good to know because I wasn't sure about if that was a defining feature or if that was just kind of variable between the two
And
species.
it's a little bit variable, but so ideally you shouldn't have to depend on it, but it can help.
Cool, good. Well, that's what I said it was, so.
All right, and Maggie, you have a picture you added?
Yes, this was another one that another person on the outing from this morning. I'm thinking this is Fervidus.
I
Does that
agree.
make sense? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Yay.
Yeah, it's a
Right,
little
even the-
blurry.
Yeah, all of this was like the best of the shots she sent. So
But it's nice when even when stuff is blurry, you can kind of see what you need to see, like that kind of strong but not super wide band of black between the wings, and then mostly just lots of yellow. The it looks like the sides all yellow and all down the abdomen.
I'm sure you all spend a lot of time looking at blurry photos. So
Yes.
Can you talk more about variable coloring on nestmates? There was a question earlier.
I really only know about that with Rufus cinctus being so much like that, but yeah, I put a comment in there. I had a Rufus cinctus nest in my yard a few years ago, and there were ones that were just the yellow swoop with the black, and there were ones that were the yellow swoop with the orange, and they're all coming out of the same nest. I mean, I assume they just have that genetic variability with their coloration that is just a thing with them. I mean, other colonies will have little variations, but it's usually when I've seen variation in color patterns with other bees, it's a lot more subtle, like, oh, this one just has kind of a stronger, a darker brown than this one does. And that could just be aging or whatnot.
Yeah, they tend to be similar, but I've seen a few nests where it's like you have the ones with orange and ones without orange. And they like to be unique.
Oh, yes, you can ask a bee mimic question too.
so
Ooh,
we saw this today. I haven't identified the species yet, but we had another species that started with the genus started with an M. Can't remember from yesterday. So, but I mean, this is kind of an awesome thing. And one of the people in the group this morning asked me, like, what is the advantage? Because this seemed to be a robber fly kind of thing, and it was taking off after smaller insects and sitting there kind of waiting for things to fly by. And other than just maybe birds don't want to eat it kind of answer, I'm not sure what the advantage is.
I mean, it probably is largely bird driven, I think.
Okay.
Um,
Because I mean, this is very convincing.
yeah, and they can even fly a little bit like bumblebees as well, I've seen.
That's cool. Yeah.
But yeah, notice like for anyone looking at this, like the thing I always look at for these is the short stubby antenna are not bee-like, and then like the wings are often like this fly wings rather than bee wings. But some of them are really good mimics.
Yeah.
some of them,
I've been fooled a couple of times.
yeah, some of them, I'm looking at them and going, wait, what bumblebee could this be? And it doesn't fit in with any bumblebee. Then I'm like, oh, there's a reason why it doesn't fit in with any of the bumblebees.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Lafria. I don't, I'm not great with fly ID.
No. Well, thanks. I will start with that and see what I can come up with.
And then we have a comment. I saw lots of Bimax and a few impatiens on my raspberries. They were too fast to get pictures of though, which happens a lot. But bumblebees, they really love raspberries. A lot of bees do. Like you get a
Hmm.
lot of Andrina as well. And they
I
kind
love
of,
I loved seeing it too because I got the last few winters the rabbits have eaten all the stalks and I haven't gotten any raspberries. This year they must have found something else to eat because we didn't have any snow, and so I got tons of raspberries this year.
yeah, they also kind of bloom at a good time when like a lot of the spring flowers are just stopping,
Mhm.
and they kind of carry over in a good period. All right, we have one more from Joe.
Yeah, so this was on a container of a hyssop. I believe it's impatiens, and judging from the size and the antenna, I think it's a queen.
Yes, correct on both counts. Yeah, and impatiens have probably one of the biggest differences. Like they always have quite large queens, and typically have smaller medium workers.
Okay. And she's the only one coming around every day.
Yeah, and they tend to be a little bit later. So they're oftentimes like some of the last queens that I see, like when like especially
Hmm.
like Bimac and Grizz have all stopped foraging their queens. I'll still see
Hmm.
impatiens out and nest searching especially.
Okay. Thank you.
So size, I can see that you also mentioned with the antennae, are you just like excluding male or is there something?
That I just was thinking because, with thinking that based on the time of year and everything, and just like with the size of the antenna, that would be a queen. And the other thing too, I haven't seen any other impatiens around at all around
Hmm.
here.
Right, we have a couple things. So we have some Rufo pictures up next. And yes, that is a Rufo. Do you have any questions about it? It's one of those queens that um, kind of the base model. She has a little bit of a racing stripe, you can see.
Well, I saw a lot of fringes on the dark T3 through 5 or whatever, but I didn't see the real racing stripe down there. But
It's
so I wasn't
subtle.
sure.
And yeah, and there's like maybe a little bit of hint of orange on T3. It's not really clear.
Yeah,
But that kind of like, yeah, the ISR on especially
yeah,
is
right.
what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, thank you.
And then there's a question, is telling queens from workers mostly about size and time of year, or is there something else I should be looking at? And that is a complicated question. Size and time of year, absolutely. And then it depends on the species. In some species, the queens are like, they look nicer, like the hairs are more close and close cropped where the workers tend to be shaggier. And I find that Rufo cinctus actually is one of the biggest examples of that, where the queens look really nice and close cropped, and the workers often kind of look like a shaggy mess, in addition to being very tiny. And Grizzioculus is kind of similar. I would say the species that's most difficult is Aricomis, because you can get some pretty large workers and some small queens. and Fervidus as well. Like some of them it's obvious, and some of them it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, I feel like this time of year is when there are some Oricomis workers coming out, but like that first batch of Oricomis workers is usually smaller. So I feel like there's some that I can be like, yes, this is a worker and this is a queen, but in a couple weeks I'm not gonna be able to tell.
Mhm. And there's, for a lot of them, there's also like the abdomen on queens tends to be a bit bigger and broader. They can kind of get a look for. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence that kind of goes into understanding whether it's a queen or worker. Sometimes, timing and size can help, and other times the look can help. And other times I'm just not sure.
So I'd be pretty safe calling it a female and just sticking with that in a lot of cases, I guess. So I think,
Yeah, Aphanus one is one of those only ones where it's like a really different color pattern.
yeah. I think it's going to be a while before I really get the hang of the shagginess and size things, but practice, yay.
Mhm.
Any other sharing anyone wants to do, or screen sharing or questions before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I have a quick question. This was so helpful and fun. I really liked seeing everyone's pictures, and I'm just wondering if you plan to do another one of these this summer, or kind of what your capacity looks like. I know this is a busy time for both of you, but this was really fun.
I'm hoping we can keep doing these as an ongoing monthly thing. And it is a little bit harder to fit in during the summer, but that's when people are out there looking at bees and getting cool pictures. So I think it's yeah. I think we'll fit it in. I've been kind of alternating when I asked people when it was a good time for them. Some people it was more kind of a lunch session. Sometimes it was evening. So I'll probably be kind of alternating between those in the different months to try to make it available to different people with different schedules. And we also record these so people can go back and look at them too if they miss them. So that's the plan. We don't have a July date picked out, but we should probably do that sooner than later because July is already looking a little nutty. But we'll be in touch. And glad to hear that that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely enjoying it. Thank you so much.
Yes, these are super, super helpful.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. And by the way, yes, I'm enjoying these very much. I wish I could have been there last month, but I was busy. What's your opinion of the bee lawn mix that the U of M Bee Lab is supporting?
So the bee lawns in general, it's one of these things where I support them in terms of having being able to have a wide variety of options available for people who are at different points in their journey towards providing habitat for pollinators. So it's definitely preferable if somebody can put in, like a pocket prairie or something that's going to have a lot of floral diversity, a lot of native plants. Some people, if it's a matter of it being, Kentucky bluegrass that's there, or there being, a bunch of white clover and maybe some other flowers mixed in there, some self-heal and things like that. That's a step up from just the straight up turf grass. So yeah, it's one step. It's not the ideal step, but if it's a notch better than what we had, then I'm for it.
Well, yeah, I have a small pollinator garden and a fairly well-established clover, and I've got prunella and thyme are
Mhm.
getting along. So let me share the picture of my pollinator garden. So this is coming along. This is about 3-4 years old.
Ooh, nice.
And you can see the clover in the background. So this is a couple of weeks ago before the prunella started blooming. So, and I got another garden in back I'm starting and just working on expanding it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that looks great. Yeah, native plant gardens are always the best thing you can do. Clover, it helps some bees. So it's good, but it definitely is not gonna help a huge variety of bees. But it's definitely better than just like a dead, sterile
Mhm.
lawn.
See lots of those around.
Yes. Yeah, I'd rather see like a clover or bee lawn than just like a chemical laden, dead, sterile lawn.
Yeah, the Rufus cinctus seems to really like the clover.
Yeah, Rufus cinctus and Griseoquis tend to visit it, and then oftentimes you just get a lot of honeybees as well.
Hi, Zach and Elaine. This is Robert Slawinski. I'm a wildlife biologist in Illinois. I live in Indiana, but do rusty patch bumblebee habitat assessments. What I've noticed mainly in this more Midwestern area, you're more upper Midwestern, but that non-natives tend to be the go-to for the bumblebee population over here. Ground ivy and field thistle seem to be the huge attractants to the species that I've seen, Fervidus, Bimaculatus, and as well as impatiens. So I really am wondering, though, that uh, there is a impetus toward uh, looking at native plant populations in several areas for rusty patch bumblebees. However, the problem is that uh, unless it's a uh, restored prairie, there are going to be a lot of non-native species available for these bumblebee species. And also crown vetch seems to be the one that I've seen as well for like Fervidus. Um, uh, do you find that even in Minnesota that that's the case as well? Is that non-natives seem okay? I see, Elaine. Okay.
Yeah, lots of the Aphanus sightings have been on, spotted knapweed and things like that. And
Okay.
I think some of it is just availability. So, they'll go to, we're lucky that they can use those plants because those are the plants that are around the
Sure.
landscape so much.
Now, Elaine, I noticed that at Indiana Dunes State Park, that the spotted knapweed is basically one of the restricted species that has been herbicided. And so and I do have a herbicide license as well. So there are times now when I'm doing field thistle control, brown vetch control, and I'm seeing bumblebees on that. What are your thoughts on, we're talking about management of natural areas like mitigation sites, what I do. What are your thoughts on that as far as like, do we hold off or keep going? I'm talking about broadleaf control and potentially like glyphosate-based herbicides as well.
It's always my hope that especially when floral resources are really limited and what is available are those, invasives that are there, that in conjunction with their control, that there is consideration for replacing the nectar and pollen sources that those provide, because they can be really important nectar and pollen sources. And yeah, actually we have a paper that is almost out on pollen analysis from a rusty patch bumblebee nest, where most of what they were using was invasives. They were in a city where so there were gardens with native plants, but still, even with little gardens here and there with lots of native plants, still the majority of what was out there is invasive. So when those are being controlled, just making sure that it's my hope that there's consideration for replacing those food sources. But it's all balanced out with the what is the goal of the of what's being done, and giving other plants a chance to do their thing, without those things
Exactly.
over.
And I need to take that into consideration doing the management of mitigation sites for wetlands and natural areas to see if there is, I mean, do I wait another week or so? I mean, would that be something that would be now? And then there are a number of species that are not essentially of conservation concern. However, as things are progressing, I know that with the Illinois Endangered Species Protection Board, they are getting a lot of petitions from people that are wanting to protect not just bumblebees, but other native bees as well. So this is in like a little bit of a contradiction of like trying to do native area management. So I really want to see if there's a reason to hold off on something like this. I know that in many cases, if you have a mature plant, it's more susceptible to herbicide than it is when it's actively growing. So, but I just want like feedback about something like that. So,
Yeah,
and
I don't
by
know
the
if
way,
I can
I
put
really
Julia on the
appreciate
spot,
your
but I
course.
know Julia does a lot of work with native plants and pollinators too. I don't know if you're tuned in, Julia, if you have anything, any ideas to share about this issue too.
Oh gosh. I just relate to the struggle. And it's a great question.
I mean, I would add, if they're currently blooming, don't spray them because you can kill a lot of bees that way. Glyphosate has some negative effects on bees, but also like the other ingredients can often be toxic to bees if they get in touch with them. And yeah, for me, it's like bumblebees especially do often visit invasives. A big part of that is driven by the lack of native resources. So I would say like replacing them is very important. And some of them, they like the non-native species.
Well, I mean,
in
nectar
general.
resources, I mean, are very important. They need to get their food from somewhere. And if there's not that it is in conflict with the maintenance and monitoring of natural areas that I'm associated with, especially in Illinois. So I will see if I can do let's say a more waiting till those resources are actually done blooming, and so that other resources are available, so that it is a struggle at that point, because then
Yeah.
if I have performance standards that I have to meet based on Army Corps or based on essentially like county requirements, or then I have to this is an internal struggle at this point, because I do want to preserve both, but I have to meet performance standards as well.
And just there is plenty of evidence to support that bumblebees are using those plants, and the harmful impacts, like Zach was saying, of either the glyphosate or the other things in the mixtures. You wanted to say something, Benton?
Yeah, I posted a link to a book that I found very interesting about this subject. Wild by Design by Laura Martin. She talks about the traditional conservation is, managing our wild world for the purposes of things that we find useful, like deer and trees and things like that. Preservation is preserving small areas as if it was before 1492 and not paying any attention to the rest of the world, just doing as we please. And restoration is recognizing that things have changed and managing the entire world in a sustainable way. If there's invasive species that we're not going to be able to do anything about, how can we live with them? And it sounds like some of these the bees are using, they're here to stay. Man, and that book really talks a lot about that. And I thought it was an incredibly good read.
And looks like Julia just shared a nice resource there too from that Xerxes has put together on weed management. Thanks.
One thing I wanted to add, and Elaine, that paper you're talking about that is going to come out. Could you maybe, like, when it comes out, let us know? That to me is
Sure.
really interesting.
Yeah.
So the one comment I have is, so the thing is that I live in an area where I discovered rusty patch bumblebee, and what's to me is still maddening to this day is there are very little native resources at all, and I don't know exactly, trying to figure out like where would they have, existed from, and like if it's not native, then what were they thriving on? Maybe the other two things I would bring up is, one is canopy pollen, is something like that in the spring. The other thing is, like, question, for instance, all around my neighborhood and just everywhere, catnip. And the pollinators will use that. Bumblebees will use it. What are your thoughts on, like, it's not native, but it attracts bumblebees, and is it something that is good to have? I mean, it's not. I don't think it's invasive, but
Yeah, it's kind of like the bee lawn kind of question too, it's like there's having something there is better than having nothing there.
Yep.
There's an abandoned lot in my neighborhood that now is full of sweet clover. That's better than when it was just a gas station, actually,
yeah.
But there's all the different levels to it, and trying to bit by bit improve habitat as we can, and hopefully hopefully it'll catch on, but being mindful of the utility of the current functioning of things, even if they're not native. There's definitely things that are not native that are supporting a lot of other native creatures.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this has been a really nice discussion. And thank you all for your thoughts and concerns. We are going to wrap this up now. And Robert, I know you joined kind of late. There is a recording that we have, so that'll be on the Canvas site, if you want to go back and see what we talked about earlier.
I will. Thank you so much. I'm a busy guy, as a
Yep.
wildlife biologist doing this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and we'll be in touch with dates for the future. So thanks all, and look forward to seeing more of your bees next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Zach.
All right. I'm good. Yeah, that went well.
Yeah, it went well. Well, we're kind of ready to go home.
All right. Yeah. Just be in touch about the next one. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye.